Hello, I'm Valerie Williams, Director of the Office of Special Education Programs, or OSEP, within the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services at the U.S. Department of Education. Thank you for joining the second annual Smart Beginnings virtual conference. Smart Beginnings is designed to share information with OSEP stakeholders, which includes parents, teachers, early childhood providers, and administrators as we start a new year of learning and discovery for infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities. The beginning of a new year of learning and discovery is a very busy time for everyone, and I want to thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule to participate. Day 2 of this 3-day virtual conference focuses on parents and families. Although I strongly encourage you to register and participate in Day 3, as I'm sure you'll find the topics of great interest. Today's conference highlights 4 presentations. The first presentation centers on effective partnering with families. The second is related to candid conversations. The third is on transition, and the fourth is on empowering families and youth. The presentations range in length from 15 to 20 minutes and are designed to provide targeted, action-oriented information that we think will be of value to you. Several presenters provided information at our recent OSEP Leadership and Project Directives Conference held last month, and we asked them to share their valuable information and tools with you today. After the last presentation today, we will also have a question and answer session. During this session, you'll be able to engage directly with today's presenters. Thank you again for joining us, and I'll now turn it over to our first presenter on Day 2 of Smart Beginnings, Sadia Batul.
Hello, everyone. I'm here to present my session for the OSEP Smart Beginning event. The session is titled Partnering with Families, Communicate, Coordinate, and Collaborate. A little bit about myself. My name is Sadia Batul, and I live in Lancaster County with my wonderful husband, Syed, and my beautiful, now 9-year-old daughter, Ahlam. Ahlam is fun, energetic, smart, and she also has a diagnosis of autism. I'm a physician by qualification, but what brought me to early childhood systems is my personal experience of receiving life-changing early intervention services for my daughter and family leadership supports for myself as a parent. And I've been serving as a family leader in Pennsylvania since 2018. I now work with the Pennsylvania Office of Child Development and Early Learning as the Early Childhood Family Lead for Pennsylvania's Early Childhood Comprehensive Systems Project, which is a federal grant that I'll be talking about in just a little bit. I'm here to talk about the different family engagement initiatives that are available to Pennsylvania families that support them in their role as parent caregivers, as well as leaders and partners in decision-making at the policy, program, and procedure level. But before we dive into what's happening around family engagement and leadership in Pennsylvania, let's talk about this policy statement released by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services on family engagement from the early years to early grades in 2016. It defines family engagement as the systemic inclusion of families in activities and programs that promote children's development, learning, and wellness, including in the planning, development, and evaluation of such activities, programs, and systems. And as you can see, for family engagement to be integrated throughout early childhood systems and programs, providers and schools must engage families as essential partners when providing services that promote a child's learning and development, and nurture positive relationships between families and staff and support families. The term families as used in this statement is inclusive of all adults who interact with early childhood systems in support of their child. This could be biological parent, adoptive and foster parents, grandparents, legal and informal guardians, as well as adult siblings. Now let's talk about family engagement in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has strong history of supporting families in their role as parents, caregivers, as well as important partners in decision-making. And a particular piece of history that's really inspiring to me in my role as a parent, as well as a family leader, is the formation of the Arc of Pennsylvania. As you all may know, in the early 1900s and before, children with intellectual and developmental disabilities were not accepted in schools and were not accepted socially. Adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities were also not accepted socially and were not employed. Parents were having a very difficult time. It was in 1949 when 8 people responded to a letter that was written to Philadelphia newspaper asking parents to meet in Philadelphia to address concerns and ways to handle the community's attitudes towards people with intellectual and developmental disability. This small group of 8 people grew as more and more people from neighboring counties like Montgomery and Bucks County became interested. On October 17, 1949, the Arc of Pennsylvania was formed. The goal was to promote the general welfare of individuals with disabilities, further education and training for professionals, promote public information, and most importantly, encourage the formation of local chapters. As of today, we have 33 chapters, local chapters of the Arc of Pennsylvania. And the Arc of Pennsylvania also played a role in getting the first federal law passed, ensuring the rights of children with disabilities to public education. The Arc of Pennsylvania promotes the human rights of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and actively supports their full inclusion and participation in the community throughout their lifetimes. Now let's see what's happening currently in Pennsylvania around family engagement and leadership. As you can see on your screen, this is the Pennsylvania Family Engagement Birth Through College Career Community Ready Framework. For our session today, we will address as the Family Engagement Framework. It serves as a guiding light for all family engagement and leadership initiatives in Pennsylvania. It is a tool that guides the implementation of effective practices, use of shared language, and a family engagement continuum for families across their child's educational lifespan. A little bit about the history of the framework. Pennsylvania Department of Education was invited to participate in the first national cohort on family engagement by the Council of Chief State School Officers in June 2017. Pennsylvania Department of Education staff received training and technical assistance from the council and their partners, including the National Association for Family, School, and Community Engagement, or NAFSCE, and the Policy Equity Center to meet 2 outcomes. The first was to develop a statewide family engagement coalition, and then to create a statewide birth through grade 12 family engagement framework. And therefore, PDE supported the development of the coalition, which consisted of over 100 individuals from across the Commonwealth that represented families, early childhood education and care representatives, school and community partners. And this coalition then co-created what we now know as the Pennsylvania Family Engagement Framework. And you can see on your screen, there are 2 documents, screenshot of the cover page for 2 documents. The first is the original framework, which was created for professionals, as described as the learning communities. And these are programs and schools to which PDE, including the Office of Child Development and Early Learning, and the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education provide funding, guidance, and monitoring. The second document was created exclusively for families. And this again includes biological families, adoptive foster families, aunt, uncle, or other invested adults who love and care for a young person. Because we know that family is not only about biological relation, but also emotional ones. And therefore, Pennsylvania has a very inclusive definition of the term family. Families are those people who have intimate caring bonds with each other over time and who take care of a child physically and emotionally. On your screen is now the family engagement definition as described in the Pennsylvania Family Engagement Framework. Just want to highlight some of the words here in this definition. Effective family engagement in the birth through college career community ready educational system is intentional, it's meaningful and impactful. Learning communities value and support families in their role as child's first teacher means that they acknowledge that the child's first teacher are their parents' caregivers. It is essential to leverage the expertise, knowledge, and leadership of families, which again means that we are acknowledging that all families are leaders of their child's team. And then these partnerships are strength-based, inclusive, culturally and linguistically responsive, and they rely on two-way communications. We're not talking at parents, we're talking with parents. So really making sure that that communication is happening both ways. This is our roadmap to the family leadership. And as you can see, it always starts from the parent caregiver to be the leader of their child's team. This could be their IFSP team in the Early Intervention Infant Toddler Program, or it could be the IEP team for parents of children in early intervention preschool to preschool or in special education services. And then along the road, there are different types of leadership opportunities that may be at the local level, at the state level, and the national level. And what's most important is the supports that are provided to families in their leadership development. And I will be talking about some of the programs. One of the things that I really want to highlight in this roadmap is that when providing opportunities to families about local or state leadership, or even at the national level, it is not only limited to providing information and resources, it's actually walking the path with families, making sure we're meeting families where they are. And this is what I experienced in my own journey as a parent and as a family leader. One of the highlight programs that I wanted to talk about today is Parents as Partners in Professional Development, or as we know it in Pennsylvania as P3D. This is one of our larger family engagement umbrella. It is a statewide family engagement initiative that has been around in various forms for quite some years, I would say about 2 decades. It started out as Natural Allies as a national project funded through the Frank Porter Grant Child Development Institute at the University of North Carolina. At that point, it was called Parents as Presenters, and the focus was parents telling their stories to students who would be working with children in early intervention. Later, as the funding died down, the project closed. However, it was revived a few years later and broadened the focus to include family voice in all statewide professional development opportunities. It has expanded beyond families just telling their story to include families providing their expertise in training development and delivering content. And recently, this program has grown once again a bit back to its roots in higher ed, but with a broader focus beyond early intervention into early childhood and childcare experiences. With the newest project called P3D PDO, PDO stands for Pennsylvania's Professional Development Organizations. This project is bringing family voice into early childhood higher education classroom. Through P3D, we have a email list of families who are interested in becoming more active in sharing their story, learning about upcoming events such as conferences, webinars, or part of the state ICC family meet and greet. This also includes information about engagement opportunities in the state performance plan, annual performance report, or other leadership opportunities such as a training program that I will be talking about next. And now I would like to talk about one of the highlight programs in Pennsylvania called the Competence and Confidence Partners in Policymaking for Families of Children in Early Intervention C2P2EI. This is a program that was modeled after Minnesota's Partners in Policymaking. C2P2EI in Pennsylvania is a year-long innovative leadership training program for parents of children in early intervention funded by the Pennsylvania Office of Child Development and Early Learning. This program provides up-to-date information on best practices, resources, and policy issues, and most importantly, connects families to other families that are receiving early intervention services from around the state. This program has been running successfully for 26 years, and the 27th cohort was recently announced. And I'm so excited to share that I'm also a graduate of C2P2EI, and this was one of the transformative programs for me that really supported me in my role as a parent, as well as a leader in Pennsylvania. Another family leadership opportunity that exists for Pennsylvania families is being part of the Pennsylvania State Interagency Coordinating Council. This is a governor-appointed council that advises and assists the Department of Health, Education, and Human Services to ensure that a comprehensive delivery system of integrated early intervention services is available to all eligible infants, toddlers, young children, and their families. I serve as the parent co-chair to the Pennsylvania State ICC. These are some of the ways Pennsylvania families can be engaged in the state ICC. Of course, it starts by being the member of the state ICC. We also have a subcommittee of the state ICC called the Committee for Stakeholder Engagement that supports the Bureau for the Intervention and Family Supports. As needed, the membership and the tasks of CSC have evolved as Pennsylvania's early intervention program has enhanced its support to young children and their families. However, it is a group of early intervention leaders from across Pennsylvania who represent infant, toddler, and preschool program, early intervention providers, and most importantly, families that have experiences in early intervention. Families can also be engaged in the state ICC by attending the family meet and greet. This is a 45-minute meeting that happens before the actual state ICC meeting. The state ICC family meet and greet is exclusively designed for families by families. It is an opportunity to learn more about the state ICC, be involved in the state ICC, and again, most importantly, to connect with other families that are receiving early intervention services. The attendees are families that are receiving early intervention services and also include the parent co-chairs of the Pennsylvania local interagency coordinating councils across the state. Another way families can be engaged in the state ICC is by sharing their family story, which is one of the most favorite agenda items on the state ICC meetings. At each state ICC meeting, a family is invited to share their experiences in early intervention birth to 5 program. Families are supported in sharing their story in different ways, which I'll be talking about in just a little bit. Families are also invited as co-presenters in other presentations. For example, last year in Pennsylvania, we started having local interagency coordinating councils share their successes and challenges at every state ICC meetings. Parent co-chairs of the local interagency coordinating councils are highly encouraged to be part of those presentations. In addition to that, other presentations that happen at the state ICC are also inclusive of families as co-presenters. Now I'd like to briefly talk about the different types of supports for family engagement that are provided to families of children receiving early intervention services in Pennsylvania. As always, it first starts with the commitment to ensuring that family voice is heard, valued, and influential in decision-making. Pennsylvania values the time and expertise that families bring to decision-making, and therefore it's really important to support them in their participation that should be meaningful. And therefore families are provided in many of these opportunities with a stipend, childcare reimbursement, and in case of in-person or where travel is needed, families are also provided with lodging and travel supports as needed. And of course, it's really important to connect families to other family leaders who have been serving as family leaders, therefore providing that mentorship opportunity. And we have a core group of family leaders in the P3D initiative that support in that role to families that are newly engaging in these activities. And then finally, technical assistance from early intervention technical assistance consultants who are assigned to all of these different family engagement initiatives. For example, there is a dedicated team of early intervention technical assistant consultants who support families who are willing to share their story. This means to prepare them for sharing their story, whether it means providing supports to put a PowerPoint together or other supports that are needed by families. Finally, I'd just like to quickly talk about our Early Childhood Comprehensive Systems Health Integration Prenatal to Age 3 project, which is a federal grant that Pennsylvania received in 2021 from the Health Resources and Services Administration, an agency of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The ECCS project is working to advance cross-sector collaborations and partnerships, health system improvements, state-level policy and fiscal innovation, equity, and family leadership to promote early developmental health and family well-being among prenatal to 3-year-old populations. I serve as the Early Childhood Family Lead on the ECCS project. And one of our project goals is to increase in Pennsylvania state-level infrastructure in order to strengthen statewide systems of care that promote early developmental health and family well-being. And what it essentially means is increasing the number of family and professional leaders that are engaged in state-level maternal and early childhood initiatives, including those leaders who represent underserved population. And while this program is open to all families from across maternal and early childhood systems, I'm really excited to share many of the families that are engaged in the variety of family leadership activities offered by the ECCS project have experiences either have graduated from the early intervention birth to 5 program or are currently receiving services. There are a variety of ways families can be engaged in the ECCS project, starting by being a member of the Pennsylvania Early Childhood Comprehensive Systems Advisory Committee, which is a cross-sector advisory committee that has representation from health, human services, education, community partners, and so much more. And I'm so thrilled to share we have about 10 family leaders who serve on the advisory committee, and many of them have received or are receiving early intervention services. In addition to that, families can also participate in surveys, developing surveys, completing surveys about the gaps and barriers in receiving services, or focus groups such as the one hosted last year when the team had conducted a system, asset, and gap analysis to address barriers in Pennsylvania's P3 services. And all the families that participate in family leadership activities are provided with a stipend and childcare reimbursement. And again, in opportunities where they have to travel, travel supports are always provided to the families. In the end, I would just like to wrap up with this quote that was adapted from Peterson and Cooper as cited in 2007. No matter how skilled professionals are, nor how loving families are, each cannot achieve alone what the parties working hand in hand can accomplish together. It is so important that we communicate, we coordinate, and collaborate with the families in early childhood systems, because if the families are supported very early on in their journey, it is then we can have a brighter and better future for all children with disabilities and their families. And with that, I'd like to thank OSEP for providing me with this opportunity to share briefly about Pennsylvania's family engagement opportunities that are available to Pennsylvania families that receive early intervention services. If you have any questions or any follow-up information is needed, please contact me, Sadia Batul, at c-sabatul@pa.gov. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our session today on facilitating family capacity building in key literacy roles. My name is Sarah Sako, and I am the Deputy Director of the National Center on Improving Literacy, or Ensel, NCIL.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kristen Kane, and I'll be joining Sarah today and co-presenting today. I lead up the family engagement strand of work for the center, as well as co-lead the targeted technical assistance strand of work with Sarah.
We wanted to start with just giving you a brief overview of Ensel. So you see here, our mission is to increase access to and use of evidence-based approaches to screen, identify, and teach pre-K through grade 12 students with literacy-related disabilities, including dyslexia. And we have 5 key priority areas that you see here on the slide. We're jointly administered by the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education and the Office of Special Education Programs at the U.S. Department of Education. And we're a federally funded TA center, so all of our resources and products are free for you to use. And you're going to be hearing about some of our family-focused resources today. The first series of resources that I wanted to share with you are our family-focused implementation toolkits. So these toolkits center on the 4 key roles that we think families and educators can play to support their child's literacy learning. Those 4 roles are support, learn, partner, and advocate. And on this slide, you see a screenshot of the landing page for each of these implementation toolkits, which are available through improvingliteracy.org. Each toolkit is very comprehensive. It includes an online interactive tutorial that is self-study on demand. So as a parent or caregiver, you can go to one or more of these implementation toolkits and engage in a learning opportunity by going through that online tutorial on your own time, and it will save where you are. So that's a great interactive feature and learning opportunity as part of the toolkit. Also within the toolkit are supporting materials such as infographics and literacy briefs developed by NCIO that relate to the topic at hand. We also have related resources within these implementation toolkits. So resources that we've curated from other organizations that promote evidence-based practices and that align with the topic of support, learn, partner, or advocate. And all of those resources, related resources, are free as well. And then finally, we also have a facilitator's guide as part of those toolkits as well. So the purpose of these online tutorials that are within the toolkits, as well as the toolkits themselves, is to expand upon information in Ensel's related literacy briefs and infographics on the same topic. So the first toolkit is focused on the role of support. So it's called Supporting Your Child's Literacy Development at Home. And it helps parents and families take part in literacy experiences at home to develop children's reading and language skills. In these toolkits, families will learn strategies, tips, activities to help their child develop as a reader from preschool through adolescence, how to listen, look, help, and encourage while you and your child participate in activities together. And all of those strategies, tips, and activities are based on research evidence. So you can be reassured that you are getting the highest quality information and resources to support you in fulfilling one or more of these 4 roles. The Learning About Your Child's Reading Development Toolkit really focuses on how children learn to read from preschool through adolescence, and our Partnering for Literacy Success Toolkits talks about how families and schools can work together to support children's literacy success in and out of school. And finally, our Advocating for the Literacy Needs of Children's Toolkits helps you learn how to effectively advocate for your child's literacy needs in both schools and early childhood settings. So those are 4 family-focused toolkits that you can explore on approvingliteracy.org. And we hope that the infographics, literacy briefs, tutorials, and other resources are helpful to you. Kristen?
Thanks, Sarah. One additional toolkit that the National Center on Improving Literacy most recently released is Understanding Evidence-Based Literacy Practices Pre-K to 3, a family edition. So in this toolkit, based off of what Sarah just shared, I would sort of file this under the Learn toolkit. It would be something that families and educators can learn together on. And the associated course with this new toolkit is an asynchronous engagement forward type course where families can move through and learn about evidence-based literacy practices that they would encounter in their school or in their district. And finally, one of our newest tools that we recently introduced at the center is a targeted technical assistance tool. This is an online form that stakeholders can access on our website, where if your community has specific needs that the center can support, you can go on and you can fill out this form, and someone from Ensel will will reach out and set up a time to speak with you, find out exactly what your community needs, whether it be around evidence-based literacy instruction, family engagement practices, and we'll come up with a plan that meets the needs of your community, and we will work closely with your team to either deliver consultation, facilitation, possibly professional development that would be appropriate to meet the needs of your community. So thank you for joining Sarah and I. We have multiple ways where you can connect with us. We are active on social media. Our website is the hub of all of the resources that we covered today, along with many, many more. And we hope that you'll visit us and engage with us. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Diana Otan, and I'm pleased to talk to you today about the Parent Center Network, Empowering Families and Youth. I work at the SPAN Parent Advocacy Network, and we house the Center for Parent Information and Resources, the Region A Parent Technical Assistance Center, and the Building Bridges Parent Training and Information Center in New Jersey. The Parent Center Network has four main components. There's a National Technical Assistance Center called the Center for Parent Information and Resources. There are 4 regional parent technical assistance centers. There are 67 parent training and information centers and 26 community parent resource centers around the country. And I'll talk a little bit more about each of these components of the Parent Center Network. The Center for Parent Information and Resources provides resources for parent centers, families, and professionals on early intervention, special education, and transition to adult life. And you can find all of those resources at www.parentcenterhub.org. The 4 regional parent technical assistance centers provide support to help parent centers reach and serve parents, youth and young adults, and professionals more effectively. And then the parent centers that serve every state and territory, the Parent Training and Information Centers and the Community Parent Resource Centers, provide information, training, and support to families, youth and young adults, and professionals. Now, what will you find when you go to parentcenterhub.org? You find a lot of great resources for families, for youth and young adults, and for the professionals who work in early intervention, special education, and transition to adult life. Some of these resources include over 1,100 materials like fact sheets, training materials on the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, parent guides, glossaries, and more. In fact, there are glossaries of early intervention and special education terms in both Spanish and Korean available at parentcenterhub.org. You can also subscribe to Buzz from the Hub, which comes out twice a month, featuring new resources, upcoming events, materials for families, and spotlights on key topics. You can find materials from other parent centers around the country, throughout the United States, including DC and the territories. And these are resources from parent centers that other parent centers can use and that families and professionals can also access and use. And on the Parent Center Hub, you can also find webinars and web pages on priority topics. And you can check the archives for webinars and resources and targeted web pages. For example, there's a great web page on the early childhood investments from the Office of Special Education Programs. You can also find resources in Spanish, and there's an index to resources in Spanish that can help non-Spanish speakers find and share information with individuals who speak and read Spanish. There's an event calendar, a listing of events of high interest to parent centers and families, as well as professionals in the field. Social media links where you can follow the Center for Parent Information and Resources on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And there are also some private platforms for parent center staff that are accessible only with a password. In addition to the National Parent Technical Assistance Center, there are 4 regional Parent Technical Assistance Centers. And here you can see the 4 regions of the country divided by color. So you'll be able to easily see where your state or territory is located. So now let's talk about the Parent Training and Information Centers, also known as PTIs, and the Community Parent Resource Centers, also known as CPRCs. So there are 67 PTIs, and each state has at least one. California, Florida, Texas, Illinois, and New York have more than one based on the large population in those states. And those additional parent centers, or PTIs, in those states are divided geographically. So if you go to the parentcenterhub.org, you can find the PTI that serves your geographic location. There's also a PTI in Puerto Rico, there's one in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and there's one serving the Pacific Territories. These PTIs competed in 2020, and so they will recompete again in 2025. PTI grants are competitive grants, and so every 5 years there's a competition to see who will be the PTI in that state or in that part of the state for those states that have more than one PTI. There are 26 CPRCs that serve targeted underserved communities. These are usually geographic and/or language ethnicity based. They competed in 2021 and will recompete again in 2026. The CPRCs don't exist in every state or territory, and so you can go to the Parent Center Hub to find out whether or not there's a community parent resource center in your state that serves your geographic location or your language or ethnicity, such as Spanish speaking or Korean speaking. So what do parent centers do? Well, the first thing is whether they're a parent training and information center or a community parent resource center, they serve parents of children with all disabilities, ages birth to 26, and also children at risk of inappropriate identification. For example, sometimes there may be a child whose issue is not a disability, but who has a need for language services because they don't speak English. And those children would also be served by the parent center that would help them find out information about how to access language services instead of special education services. Parent centers also provide training and information to parents to help their children meet developmental and educational goals and lead productive lives. There's also a special focus for parent centers on reaching and helping underserved parents. That's a priority population for the Department of Education as well as for parent centers. Parent centers help parents understand their children's needs, communicate and collaborate with schools and providers, participate more effectively in decision-making, for example, in the development of the Individualized Family Services Plan, the IFSP in early intervention, or the Individualized Education Program in special education, get information about resources in their state, territory, community, and nationally, and also understand the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and other relevant federal and state laws. For example, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, WIOA, and other relevant federal and state laws. Parent centers also help parents and youth participate in school activities, participate in school reform or school improvement activities, resolve disputes with early intervention and with the school system, understand their rights, understand and use the different dispute resolution options under IDEA and other related laws, and network with appropriate partners to make sure that children and youth receive the early intervention, special education, and transition to adult life services that they need. And all of these services are provided at no cost to families or to the professionals that access them. For example, families and professionals can call parent centers and get the information that they need at no cost to them. So contact your parent center. Contact your parent center if you need individual help understanding your rights, how to navigate the early intervention, special education, and/or transition to adult life systems, best practices and resources, information on the trainings and workshops that they do in their state, territory, or area of service, and also get connection to other resources. And if you're a professional, don't hesitate to contact your parent center, because between 25 and 35% of the individuals that are helped by parent centers, whether by individual assistance or by trainings, are professionals in the field. And how do you find your parent center? You go to the parentcenterhub.org, find your center, and you will be able to connect with any of the parent centers, whether it's a parent training and information center or a community parent resource center. You'll be able to find the email to get information, the website to go to get resources, the toll-free number if there is one, the phone number, and the address of the center. And so now I want to thank you for participating and open it up for any questions. Thank you, and be sure to reach out to your parent center to find your information, resources, and the help you need around early intervention, special education, and transition to adult life.
Hello, my name is Michael Storr, and I work for the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition, the Collaborative. And today I'd like to share with you some practical transition strategies to heighten expectations, engagement, and empowerment for students with disabilities. I'd like to start off just by talking a little bit about what exactly is the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition, the Collaborative. We are a jointly funded center that's funded by the U.S. Department of Education, both the Office of Special Education Programs, OSEP, and the Rehabilitation Services Administration, RSA. Our goal and mission is to help state and local schools and agencies to better support students and youth in making successful transitions to adult life. And we build upon the history of our past TA centers. So our partners come from both the Workforce Innovation and Technical Assistance Center, or NTAC, which is funded through RSA, the Youth Transition Center, also funded by RSA or YTAC, and then the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition, which was NTAC, and that was funded both through OSEP and RSA. We are comprised of a number of universities from across the country. I work at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte, and you'll notice on the map, there's a lot of highlighted areas, states throughout the country. That's actually where we all work. A lot of us work virtually, and we support all the states and territories across the United States. I want to share a little bit of information regarding our website and our resources, and we encourage you to go to our website, which is transitionta.org. On that site, you can find live and pre-recorded webinars, as well as a number of resources, including toolkits, online modules, FAQ documents. We also encourage you to sign up for our weekly email news blast, and you can do that by going to transitionta.org and scroll to the bottom of that homepage, and you'll be able to find a sign-up sheet for our news blast. And the news blast provides information on transition activities from throughout the country. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to send an email to NTAC, that's NTACT-COLAB @uncc.edu. And that's a way to get in contact with us if you have any general questions. So today, these are the takeaways from my time with you. We would like to talk a little bit about the key commonalities and considerations for life transitions. Also want to talk to you about the importance of collaboration and presumed competence of our youth, our students, your sons and daughters working with, and then leave you with a few transition resources that you can investigate for additional information. So transition, what is it? It happens when a person moves from one life stage to another. And it's really about planning for the future, figuring out what those next steps are going to be. It's important to remember that transition really is a coordinated effort. And you, as a family member, as an advocate, someone that is really supporting the young folks in your lives, your sons, your daughters, those young people that you're connected with, that you play an integral part of this transition process. The process or the coordination effort really involves the school, you as family members, your sons and daughters, the students and youth, as well as those outside agencies and support services. So it really is this triad of support, and that is included in all stages of transition that we're going to move in to talk about next. It's important too, as we look at transition, that families look at this and start early, and that your needs, desires for your son and daughter are considerations that occur early. There's a family member that I worked with a number of years ago, and starting in her daughter's second grade IEP meeting, she brought up that her daughter and her really desired that when she was going to graduate and go on in adult life, she wanted her to be independent and have a job where she was working competitively and engaged in her community. And she said, okay, so in second grade, what are we doing to get there? And every year after that, that's how the IEP meeting started. And eventually her daughter was leading those IEP meetings, asking those same questions. So really thinking about that. How can, looking at the future and what those expectations are going to be, how can we incorporate that into those plans when you're sitting down and thinking about the future for your sons and daughters? When we talk with education staff and agency staff, we really encourage that they're building trustworthy relationships with you as a family member, as well as your sons or daughters, those young folks, the students. It's also important that the professionals realize that you all hold the key and a lot of history. You're with your sons and daughters, those folks that you support, and you really do have a depth of knowledge. So sharing that and really talking about your dreams, desires, and having your, again, sons, daughters, those young folks in your life sharing those goals. And to provide support throughout this process. To families, to the young person, as well as professionals, we encourage to really engage and understand each other's systems and requirements that they have. So when we think about transition, they really do cover all of the various life stages, from birth to 3 years old, as well as 3 years old into preschool. And then if you look on the screen, these other transitional periods. So preschool to kindergarten, elementary to middle school to high school. The one that we hear the most about when we hear transition in the education world, we usually think of high school into college or adult life. So that transition. But then there's also the transition considerations once an individual goes on for further training after high school to adult life. So those are transitions. You may think about yourself, transitions that you have made in your own life and what it took in order to be successful. So when we think about that, and you think about your own life transitions, think about what you needed to do. And one of the things is really to embrace change and recognize there's stress, and there's stress in change. It's also important for us to prepare and understand what the expectations are in the next environment. So if a student is moving from, or your son or daughter is moving from middle school to high school, what are the expectations in high school? Or as a student gets ready to graduate, as your son or daughter's leaving and they're going on to further training, to a college program or another type of training, or they're moving right into competitive employment, what are those expectations? What are community expectations going to be? So really having an understanding about that, and then taking a backward step and seeing, what are we doing right now? And right now, that might be elementary school, that might be middle school or high school, to best prepare that young person to be successful. It's also important to understand and build networks, and understanding what supports are available in your state, in your local area, in your community. Accessing and talking to other families on what they did to be successful. It's also a good idea to understand the tools and resources that are available. And really, I think these last 2 points, that self-care is really important. This is overwhelming and can be, and it can be frustrating. So take time to breathe, take time to reach out to supports, and to be patient and celebrate successes, even the small gains that your sons or daughters are making. It's also important to presume competence of the children in your life. Learned helplessness and independence come from you being that family member, that caregiver, as well as the professionals that work with that young person, be that a teacher or an agency staff. And to remember that there's true dignity in risk. When you think about it in your own lives, and I know in my life, I learned more from the mistakes I made than the successes I've had. So really allowing that young person to screw up. And then have a discussion on, yes, that was difficult. You didn't, that you had a problem there, but what did you learn from that? And how could you do things differently the next time? It's also important for the young person to have a sense and develop self-determination skills and really provide opportunities for them to be successful. On this slide, we provide a few examples on some teachable moments that you can do as a family member in helping to support that young person in your life to be successful. So using real life situations, in the community, going out to a restaurant, holding expectations, does your son, daughter, that young person in your life, are they required to do household chores? Are they engaged in the community? Volunteering is another really, really good way of exposing that young person to situations that they can not only give back, but also engage. It's important that young folks are given the opportunity to make choices. And as I mentioned before, to, make mistakes and live with the consequences of those mistakes. All of this does take time. It is far easier to oftentimes do for somebody. But really, the outcome of putting the little bit of extra time in and allowing that young person to make choices and engage is so crucial to their success in transition. So in looking at transition and how we can make all of this easier, how you as a family member, as an advocate can engage, as well as professionals helping you along the way, it's important to begin planning early. And really, you cannot start too early to start thinking about the future. So, even in preschool, even in elementary school, thinking about what's life going to be and what do I envision for my young person I'm involved with, but also for that young person to dream and think about what their future is going to look like. To understand that you need to engage folks in this process. You're not going alone. You're not in an island. And it's also important to know that even within a system like the education system, there's a lot of players. And how are the roles of those various staff in the education system, how are they coordinating? So in other words, how is general education teachers, special education teachers? And then if your young person is involved in occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech language therapy, maybe they have a behavior plan. How are all those folks working together and how is that being coordinated? Because it really should be a coordinated effort. And are you aware of all these folks and what their roles are? And then looking outside of the school system, what are agencies doing, like vocational rehabilitation, like the intellectual developmental disabilities that are available in states at the state and local level? How are all those players engaging and collaborating? And how are you sharing information? Also, if your son, daughter, that young person in your life is engaged in the healthcare system, how is that being coordinated? And yes, it's a lot. So again, going back to that self-care and breathe and really reach out for supports, keeping that in mind as you're looking at these various transitions. It's important to you as a family member or an advocate to also engage in those information sessions and trainings that oftentimes are often through the education system or other agencies. And yes, it takes time. And you all have really busy, overpacked lives, but taking that time to engage in those opportunities or to view things online. Go to our website, for example, that I mentioned, transitionta.org. We do have a lot of resources. It's also important to engage in move-up activities What I'm talking about there is if the young person is moving, say, for example, from middle school to high school, to allow that opportunity for that young person to go to that high school while they're still in middle school, then maybe in 7th or 8th grade, and experience what that's like, to explore what the expectations are, to meet their teachers. Oftentimes schools will provide the opportunity at an IEP meeting to have the teachers of that next level grade engaged in that IEP meeting. So for example, if that student is moving from, or that young person is moving from elementary to middle school, having those teachers involved, the middle school teachers involved in that elementary school IEP meeting. So there's collaboration and coordination. Some additional considerations to think about is engaged planning so that everybody knows what their responsibilities are. So whether that's the IEP document and looking at who is responsible for doing what within the school day, or what you all as a family member are going to be engaged with your young person, your son, daughter, in their life. It's also important to, again, to take a break and step back and realize that there are a lot of stressors, pressures, and to recognize those, and to, and I think supporting your sons, daughters, those young people in your life too, recognizing what supports can be given, because it is a challenge and change is difficult, and recognizing that. Also, in working with the professionals to make sure that there is a good coordination and transfer of information. I think sometimes families often get overwhelmed with all of this, and, to keep good records and to share information out that you're aware of when you're in meetings, but also to hold accountable those professionals, and how is that information being shared among them regarding your son, daughter, those important young folks in your life. It's important to connect with other families, families that are currently going through the process, but also looking at those that have already been through that transition. Whether, again, that's a transition between grade levels, so, preschool to elementary or middle to high school, but also those families that have had their now grown adult sons and daughters transition to adult life and connecting with them. And then lastly, it's really important to think about communication, coordination, and collaboration. Those 3 C's are critical to success, and that you are actively engaged and involved in that process as a family member and advocate. On this slide, I just wanted to leave you with a few resources. You may be aware of these, but I wanted to bring those to your attention. The first is the Center for Parent Information and Resources. That can be found at the web address is parentcenterhub.org, and those are all spelled out. And that really is a wonderful resource for families to go to for a variety of information, but including information on life transitions. There's also something called the Guidepost for Success, and it's a framework for success that was developed through the Federal Department of Labor. And that website is also on the screen, and you can find that, and it's dol.gov/agencies/program-areas/individuals/youth/guide. It's a lot of slashes, but that's a really good resource looking at these key guides for transition. And lastly, one of our partners that we share, you'll notice on that screen when I talked about all the universities that made up NTAC, the collaborative, one was the University of Kansas. And at the University of Kansas is something called the Transition Coalition, which can be found at transitioncoalition.org/transition. And on that site, you can find modules and information regarding transition activities. There's training modules on there. It's really great information. So I thank you for joining this session today, and hopefully there were some really good takeaways. I'm just going to leave you with some additional contact information. So my contact information is on the screen, and you can reach me at mstoehr@charlotte.edu. And I also have information on this slide that includes both our website, transitionta.org, as well as the address ntac-collab@uncc.edu to contact us. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Al Jones. I'm Associate Division Director within the Office of Special Education Programs at the U.S. Department of Education. And I'd like to welcome you to day 2, the question and answer portion of Smart Beginnings today, which is focusing on parents and families. There have been a number of questions that have come in through the chat. And I'd like to go through those questions again so that if you weren't reading the chat and listening at the same time, which I know is almost impossible, you'll have a chance to hear some of those great responses that we've provided already for participants today. And also, as you've been listening to the information from our presenters, I encourage you to put your questions in the chat now, and we'll have our presenters answer those questions live for you. While you're generating those questions now for our presenters, I'm going to go back through some of the questions that have already been answered in the chat. And I'll start with you, Michael. The first question was a very easy one. Can you repeat the 3 C's? And I have a follow-up question for that, which was the question relates to many transitions from CPSE to CSE involve closing out some of the CPSE files. Parents are told and that reopening of a new file, which sometimes seems to be declassification of a student without appropriate testing, a notice to parents. How can you avoid this situation? So I've got 2 questions there for you.
Alrighty, thanks. And actually, they're related questions. So the 3 C's were communication, coordination, and collaboration, which I thought was interesting. It was on today's last slide. So I didn't realize that phrase was everywhere. But I think in answering the other question that you had, I think this is referencing somebody from the state of New York. So I guess to preface this, each state has different acronyms for all this stuff, which makes it all interesting, especially those of us that work with all the states and territories. But it's referencing the Committee on Preschool Special Education, which is the meeting, the title that's used as students are in preschool programs that have special needs. And when that individual becomes school age, there's a transfer to the Committee on Special Education, or CSE. And I think getting back to that communication, coordination, and collaboration, I think it's real important that families are engaged in both their preschool programs as well as with that school age program, and having that discussion and that communication. It is true that the state of New York, the classification changes in preschool programs. It's something that's considered, it's an individual, a student with a disability in the preschool program. When that student goes into the school age system, they are looking at classification of 13 categories of disability as listed under IDEA. So there is a change that occurs, but families should be actively engaged in that process, and engage early while your son or daughter are still involved in the preschool program, and communicate with your next the kindergarten program. And families ultimately have a voice in this whole process and can raise questions and have that discussion. I think in both the preschool and the school age systems, everybody wants what's best for your son or daughter, in making that transition process. So again, become informed, engaged, ask questions. The other suggestion is to contact other families that are recently going through that process, so you have a good understanding of what occurs in your particular school district.
Thank you, Michael. We had a request for Kristen and Sarah, if you could provide the link again for the implementation toolkits. I think that's valuable information that all the participants would like to know.
Yes, we're happy to provide that. You can access all of our resources at improvingliteracy.org, and we will put the specific link to the implementation toolkits in the Q&A for you.
And Diana, this next 2 questions go to you. How can a local organization become a PTI? Who do they need to reach out about the PTI grant, and is there a limit per state?
So first thing is that you can find information when those competitive grants become available. They come out in the Federal Register, so you can find out by checking the Federal Register. As I said in my presentation, these are 5-year grants, and the next PTI competition is not going to be until 2025, and the next Community Parent Resource Center application process will be a year later in 2026. You do have to be a nonprofit organization. Your board has to have a majority parents of children with disabilities aged birth to 26, and you have to have as a mission of your organization serving the full range of disabilities. So if you are an organization that focuses on one disability, then you won't be able to get a parent training and information center grant or a community parent resource center grant. If you are interested in learning more about how to become a parent center, you can certainly reach out to the U.S. Department of Education that can tell you more information about the requirements for an organization to become a parent center, but it is a competitive application. The number of PTIs are based on population. Every state has one, and a few states, as I said in my presentation, have more than one that's based on population. So California, Texas, et cetera. And in the community parent resource centers, there are only 26 of those. So that's competitive across the whole country and the territories. There could be 50 great applicants, but only 26 would be funded because that's the amount of money that's available to fund the community parent resource centers right now.
And Celia, this next question is a very related question in the same vein. How did you come up with a family engagement coalition? How did Pennsylvania come up with the mission or vision of the coalition?
Thank you so much for this question. As I mentioned that Pennsylvania had received support from the National Association for Family, School, and Community Engagement, the Council for Chief State School Officers, and the Policy Equity Center to develop the coalition. I was not part of the team since I had just entered into early intervention. However, I currently work with a number of members that were part of that coalition and would be happy to connect to a member who at the time was part of the coalition.
And this next question is an open question for all of our presenters. Are there any services or support for language acquisition and literacy of deaf or hard of hearing children?
So I'll say that parent centers are required to provide information, accessible information, and also language access for people who speak languages other than English as well as American Sign Language. So we are required to make our materials and our training and our information accessible to populations that require the use of different languages. And I will leave it up to some of the other presenters to talk about any resources specific to those populations that they might have.
NCIL has a number of resources to address different populations and different types of students with disabilities. We have in our new course that Kristen Kane profiled on understanding evidence-based reading practices, as well as a video series accessible through our videos and webinars section of our website.
And Diana, we have a question that came in. Can a PTI employ special education advocates and provide them for free to low-income families?
So the role of a parent center, according to the U.S. Department of Education and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, is not to provide free advocates to represent parents. It really is to provide families and youth and young adults the information and resources that they need to be able to advocate on their own behalf. However, parent centers are a very diverse group. There are parent centers that have attorneys on staff. There are parent centers that will accompany parents to IFSP or IEP meetings or support them at mediations. There are parent centers that train other parents to be volunteers to support parents at IEP meetings, IFSP meetings, etc. So to find out what exists at the parent center that serves your state or your community, just reach out to the parent center and find out. You can go to their website or call them and find out about the services that they provide. We, as parent centers, provide information and training. You can call us up, you can go to our workshops, you can go to our website, and we have lots of resources that can help you learn how to be a more effective advocate.
And Sadie, in the same vein, this is also a related question about additional information about the C2P2 EI program. Is it available in other states, and how do you find out more information about that?
Yes, it is available in other states. Actually, the program that's available in Pennsylvania is modeled off the Minnesota's Partners in Policymaking, and we have two versions of this program. The one is the early intervention, which is for families of children that are currently receiving early intervention birth to 5 services. And then we have a school age version, which is open to families who have children receiving special education services, as well as individuals who have disabilities. I would suggest reaching out to your Parent Training Information Center in your state, as shared by Diana, to find out if a Partners in Policymaking program exists in your state.
And this is an open question for all of our presenters. What did you suggest a parent does when the school does not see a parent as a member of a team?
Well, I was just responding to that in writing, to that question. Again, I would suggest reaching out to your parent center, because parent centers have a lot of information and resources on how parents can advocate to be seen and as effective and equal members of the team. There are also some great resources on the parentcenterhub.org, both about your legal role, your rights and responsibilities as a member of the IFSP and IEP team, but also tools and strategies to be more effective in that role, and also how to work more productively with the other team members so that they recognize the value add and the essential role that you as the parent have in making decisions about your child.
Now, we've gone through all the questions that have come in so far. I'll give folks a couple more minutes to place questions into the Q&A portion. But while they're doing that, is there anything any presenter would like to share that maybe they didn't have a chance to share in your presentation that you would like to communicate before we leave our presentation portion, Q&A portion of this event today?
This is Diana Oten again. I will add that Sadia did mention the policy paper, the joint policy paper that came out from the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services around family engagement in the early years. And that not only has some great information about the importance of families as effective and equal partners in decision making for their young children, but also cites to some of the research, some of the research that documents the important role that families have, the knowledge that they have that's critical for them to share with professionals in making decisions in the earlier intervention and special education process. So I think also looking to some of the policy guidance from the U.S. Department of Education about the role of families in decision making could also be useful.
And we have one question that just came in the Q&A section. Are there resources for emotional support tools to help children and students and even adults who experience dyslexia? Our world is so literacy focused, it is exhausting to advocate all the time.
I can chime in here and say from NCIL that we recognize a whole child approach to improving reading outcomes for students, all students, including those with dyslexia. So many of our resources emphasize the social and emotional aspect to dyslexia and students with reading difficulties. And so in many of our tools, you will find connections to resources that
address these social and emotional aspects and needs alongside the language and literacy needs of children.
Well, I'll give another second or so for any additional questions to come in.
There also are resources that are funded by the U.S. Department of Education that are specifically technical assistance and dissemination centers that are focused on children with dyslexia and other learning disabilities, helping children and families access reading material that can be that can be used by the young person who has a learning disability, including dyslexia. And so if you go to the U.S. Department of Education website and type in technical assistance and dissemination, it will take you to a page that lists all of the different what we call TAND projects. And you will be able to see ones that are specifically focused on learning disabilities. And through the COVID pandemic, many of the technical assistance and dissemination centers developed resources that were specifically aimed at helping families and children navigate the additional challenges that came about because of the pandemic. And I think some of those also include resources focused on addressing some of the mental health challenges that both families and children and professionals have faced throughout the pandemic and as we are coming out of it.
Well, it looks like we have answered all the questions that have come in so far. At this point, I'm going to close our question and answer portion of today's session. And I am going to introduce David Cantrell to close us out.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Al. I'm David Cantrell, the OSEP Deputy Director here in the Office of Special Education Programs within the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services here at the U.S. Department of Education. On behalf of OSEP and all of our presenters today, thank you again for joining us. If you have any additional questions for our presenters, or if you did not have an opportunity to ask a question, please enter your question into the chat. After this year's Smart Beginnings Conference, OSEP will continue to reach out via email to keep you updated on new resources and documents that are related to topics shared during this virtual conference. Additionally, you may access a recorded version of this year's event and review presentations from last year's Smart Beginnings Conference on OSEP's Ideas That Work website. As we close today's virtual conference, I want to remind all participants that you can earn continuing education units for your participation in Smart Beginnings this year. After the conclusion of the Smart Beginnings 3-day event, which is tomorrow, Thursday, an email will be sent with a link to all participants with instructions on how to apply. Thank you again for your participation today.
Thank you, everyone. This concludes our virtual conference for today.